God can use anybody to make anything happen, regardless of whether you categorize them as good or as bad. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chika Adioshun and you're watching Simpler with Chika. I have a Bible reading challenge series going on conjointly with my other sorts of videos. So today we'll be reviewing Joshua. I have read far beyond Joshua already. I have read I'm now up to 2 Samuel. I do have some notes, but I'm really casting my mind back to how I felt in the moments reading through this book. So forgive me if something's a bit slower or a bit disjointed. So in Joshua, basically, Moses has passed on and Joshua is now, leading the people of Israel. One of the key things that happen in the book of Joshua is taking over Jericho. In chapter 1, there's a lot of emphasis on Joshua to be strong and courageous. God tells him that, But chapter 2, we're going to spy on Jericho because this is one of the places that God is going to give to them. And I remember reading through this chapter and I had this thought. There was a prostitute who helped the spies, housed them and everything, and kept quiet about them. Ooh, flies. About them being in Jericho. And then the prostitute, and I was reading this and I was like, oh, she's so brave and smart. She's smart because, obviously the children of Israel are going to win, are going to take over the city because everyone's already scared of them. They know that they're not just fighting as mere men and soldiers. They've got God fighting for them. They have an unfair advantage. So this woman was so brave and so smart and a good person because she didn't say, for this good that I've done to you, when you come to take over the city, have mercy. Don't destroy my family and my household. And that was what happened for her. When Jericho was taking over, her family, all her relatives were protected. I remember thinking wow, she's so smart, she's such a good person, why is she a prostitute? When I caught myself, I'm usually reading the Bible at 5 a.m. in the morning, so my thoughts are just raw. My thoughts are just whatever comes to my mind, and I like that because it's not filtered. And I was like, oh, judgment. It's often interesting to me how as society, maybe even subconsciously, just expect people to be bad because they do bad things. What if God just treated us as if we were bad because we do bad things? You know what I mean? And that's such a huge lesson. God can use anybody to make anything happen, regardless of whether you categorize them as good or as bad. And fun fact, water was parted twice in the Bible. Well, twice thus far that I've read. There was Eliot waters. There was also parted for the children of Israel to walk through. So the Moses part in the Red Sea thing, the water parting happened more than just that time with Moses. Most of this year I've been paying a lot of attention to Transformation Church. In fact, I would call Transformation Church my church, even though I live in New Zealand. The topic for the start of the year was Here is Holy, and the focus scripture was, in that when God came to speak to Moses in the burning bush, and when he called out to Moses, he told Moses to take off his shoes. So the same thing happens, a similar thing happens with Joshua, where the commander of the army of the Lord appears to Joshua and tells him, take off your shoes, in the same way. So I just think wow, that's just so interesting, And if you think about some other Abrahamic religions like Muslims and stuff, how they take off their shoes when they go into temples and stuff, I reckon there's a lot of significance in that. And I think the main significance, thinking back to Transformations Church teaching on Here is Holy, is centering oneself to where you are. Y'all, we're having a fly situation in this house. I don't know what's going on. You're right here talking to the commander of the army of the Lord, so be present. And I thought that was quite cool. With the prostitutes in Jericho that helped the spies, the Israeli spies. Anyone, just reading the Bible can see this unfair heavenly advantage that the children of Israel had. We go through life and all of life's ups and downs with the unfair advantage of having God, having God walk this life with us, and as opposed to somebody who doesn't have God, and in battle, this advantage of having God is so clear. It's so like there's literally God's army also fighting human beings for you. You know what I mean? So I think for me, my thought while reading that was just to really like be aware of that and really tap into that resource that I have as a Christian. And then it was just a whole lot of battles won, land allocations, and defeating kings of different lands, more land allocation from chapters 14 to like 17, setting boundaries, and then sort of talking about houses and cities of refuge, cities for the Levites from each tribe, because the Levites can't actually own anything. So the tribe of Manasseh was one of the last few tribes to find a settlement, a place to settle. And the advice to the tribe of Manasseh was, as they went into their own land, was to cling to God. I'm in a place where I feel like there's some changes coming up in my life, and this thing of clinging to God. I'm blessed to have this Bible reading challenge. It's funny because it felt like a challenge at start, because I was reading my little 3 verses in the morning, and now I'm reading like 3 to 4 chapters in the morning, and it felt like such a challenge. Like, damn, I'm really having to work hard to do this. But to be honest, it's causing me to cling to God, to remember God, because I'm literally digesting like up to an hour's worth of content from the Bible every morning. Before, when it was sort of not quick to come to mind that you can talk to God about this, or what does God have to say about this, it's becoming quicker, and I think that's definitely helping me with this thing of clinging to God. It was good advice because like I said, I've read further on into the Old Testament, past the book of Joshua, and what the children of Israel really struggle with is all of the outside influence of the other countries around them and the gods that they serve. I took that very personally for myself that morning, like cling to God. How it says pray without ceasing, like stuff like that, like being a very clingy lover, or in your relationship with God. There was this really cool thing that happened, as the children of Manasseh. So I think they went across to Jordan. So most of the other tribes of Israel were grouped in one area before the river, right? So these guys go across the river, and they built up an altar. And the majority of the Israelites being on the other side were like, what have they done? They're now worshipping idols so blatantly that they built an altar for it. And it was literally going to be a civil war. But then it turned out that they had built an altar separately of their own than the altar that's already built on the other side, because it's such a journey to cross the river to go to the other altar to worship. So they've built their own altar, and the explanation was like, so your children don't what's the right word, isolate or try to differentiate our children in the future from worshiping God, because they're coming from so far away. So having their own altar means that they can also worship God. So it was an altar built to God. It wasn't like built to another God. It was built to, the God of Israel. I just loved reading that. It was so beautiful because it's this forward thinking. And I think there's a scripture in the Bible, I won't know where it's from, but it says like a good man leaves an inheritance for his children and his grandchildren, stuff like that, something like that. And I admire that so much when I see people living their life today beyond themselves for people that they may never ever see in their life, but they live their life for this other generation they may never know. And I just think that's really beautiful, that life of legacy. And further towards the end of the book of Joshua was a recount of, you know, the history. And it's actually very interesting how this is literally some people's history. Like, the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is literally like a group of people, like it's their history book. And I think that's pretty cool. That is really my entire review for the book of Joshua. I hope it's been interesting for you. Like I said, I did read this book quite some time ago, and it's a lot of recollecting what has happened, and I'm sure I've missed out on some key parts because I couldn't even make sense of some of my notes. But the next book after Joshua is Judges, and yeah, that should be pretty interesting as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.